Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We are going to strip away all that slick financial industry marketing and look at the uncomfortable, undeniable real math of how money actually grows, compounds, and ultimately survives. We're going to look right past the catchy slogans and the hype to show you the hard numbers behind the decisions that will literally dictate your financial freedom.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll be walking through 5 key areas. First, the sequence of wealth. Then, the tax account dilution. After that, assets, leverage, and reality. Then we'll look at the invisible bond engine. And finally, surviving your own mind. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The sequence of wealth. Doing the right things in the right order.
We really have to start with this foundation, because when you invest and the exact order you invest in matters way more than what you're actually investing in. Think of this sequence as your financial ladder. Skipping steps here is a pretty catastrophic mistake. Before you even think about buying a single stock, you absolutely need that $1,000 starter emergency fund. It's your firewall, right? It means a broken transmission doesn't force you to suddenly liquidate your investments. Then, you grab the employer match. That is a guaranteed immediate 50 to 100% return on your money. Honestly, you're never going to beat that in the stock market. After that, you've got to crush your high-interest debt, because carrying a 20% credit card balance while hoping for an 8% market return is just a guaranteed way to lose. Only after all of that do you max out tax-advantaged accounts like a Roth IRA. Trust me, skipping these steps will cost you.
Now, when you get that sequence right, you unlock a timeline that looks like this. Most folks intuitively think of compounding as this steady staircase, right? But actually, compounding doesn't build a staircase, it builds a ski jump. If you invest $500 a month at an 8% return, after 10 years, you're sitting on a modest $91,000. It kind of feels like you're pushing a boulder up a hill. But if you just hold on, the massive million-dollar explosion happens almost entirely in that final decade, years 30 to 40. Time is literally the ultimate lever here. Time compounds so much harder than money does.
Moving right along to Section 2, the tax account illusion. Opposite entry points, vastly different outcomes.
The specific account you use can honestly create a 6-figure difference in your retirement, even if you're holding the exact same assets. Let's look at Maya and James. They both invest identical amounts, get identical market returns. Now, Maya goes with the traditional 401k. She gets a nice tax deduction today, but her balance creates what we call a tax illusion. That huge number she sees at the end, it isn't all hers. She has a hidden future tax obligation to the government at whatever the tax rates happen to be 30 years from now. James, on the other hand, uses a Roth IRA. He pays his taxes today, which means all that money grows completely tax-free. When he retires, he has total immunity from future government tax hikes and mandatory distributions. And that immunity, it can literally be a multi-$100,000 advantage for James.
Section 3. Assets, leverage, and reality. The real math of ownership. So we're transitioning now to where your money actually lives. And there's an extremely important axiom you've got to remember here. Income keeps you alive today, but equity is what makes you free tomorrow. Let's compare 2 incredibly popular physical assets. Over a 20-year span, Jake uses a 20% down payment to control a massive real estate asset. That is 5-to-1 leverage. Now, it's a messy machine. It requires maintenance, tenant screening, a lot of stress. But because of that leverage and the cash flow, his net position balloons to roughly $460,000. Meanwhile, Marcus buys physical gold. It's safe armor, right? No tenants, no awful late-night phone calls, but because it has absolutely no leverage, produces literally zero income, and gets hit with a massive 28% collectibles tax, Marcus only nets about $182,000. Gold is armor. Real estate is a machine. You just have to know which one you're wearing.
But listen, we have to shatter a huge illusion about that real estate machine. The old financial rule of thumb says you should spend 28% of your income on housing. So if you make $80,000 a year, your budget is about $1,867 a month. The banking industry absolutely loves to show you just the principal and interest on a $280,000 home to make you feel like, hey, I can afford this. But look at the real math for 2026. When you add up the uncomfortable, actual monthly costs, we're talking property taxes, insurance, PMI, and realistic maintenance, your actual cost jumps to $2,703. Getting approved for a mortgage and actually surviving a mortgage, 2 completely different things.
4%. When it comes to investing in assets like stocks, this single shocking percentage dictates absolutely everything.
Research covering the market from 1926 all the way to 2019 shows that a mere 4% of individual stocks generated 100% of the stock market's wealth creation. The other 96%, collectively, they performed no better than boring treasury bills. I mean, this makes a mathematically bulletproof case for why owning the whole index fund beats looking for the needle in the haystack. If you try to pick individual stocks, the mathematical odds are overwhelmingly high that you're going to land in that 96% that do practically nothing. By buying the entire index, you guarantee that you own that 4% of massive winners that end up dragging the whole market upward.
Okay, Section 4, the invisible bond engine, the $13 trillion force.
Zooming out from your personal portfolio for a second, we need to talk about the underlying macroeconomic force that dictates the price of literally everything you own, even if you never directly buy one. Stocks always get the flashy headlines, but the global bond market, sitting at roughly $130 trillion, completely dwarfs the stock market. Bonds are the invisible engine of the world. They dictate global interest rates, they dictate your mortgage costs, and they represent worldwide financial trust. When bond prices fall and yields rise, it basically means the world is demanding more money to trust a government or a corporation.
And that naturally brings us to the yield curve. In a healthy economy, long-term bonds pay more than short-term bonds. But when this line inverts, meaning short-term rates are suddenly higher than long-term ones, it means investors are terrified of the near future. An inverted yield curve has preceded every single U.S. recession since 1955. Understanding this curve is absolutely crucial right now, especially as the U.S. government is being forced to roll over old, cheap debt into new, much higher interest rates. The U.S. is projected to soon spend over $1 trillion a year just on interest payments alone. That changes the math for the entire global economy.
And finally, Section 5, surviving your own mind, the ultimate enemy of wealth.
Look, the crucial point here is that none of this math, none of these asset classes, none of this macro data matters even a little bit if you can't survive the most dangerous obstacle in finance, your own psychology. Consider Wendy and Bridget. Wendy is terrified of market highs. She sits on her cash, waiting for a 10% dip just to get a good deal. Bridget? She has terrible timing and only ever invests at absolute all-time highs. So who wins? Historically, Bridget absolutely crushes Wendy. By waiting on the sidelines, Wendy misses the market's most explosive days of compounding and dividend reinvestments. Missing just the 10 best days in the market over a 20-year period can literally cut your total returns in half. Bridget wins because all-time highs are usually just stepping stones to new all-time highs.
During market bubbles, our brains kind of short-circuit. We stop looking at value and we only look at price. We forget that, in a mania, you aren't actually buying the company. You are buying a ticket in a sequential auction, and you're just betting you won't be the last person holding it. This perfectly explains financial manias. Whether we're talking about the dot-com bubble or the 2006 housing crash, ordinary people bought wildly overpriced assets simply because the crowd convinced them someone else would pay even more tomorrow. And man, when the music stops, the crash is devastating.
So, let me ask you a really vital question, just to understand why avoiding those massive, crowd-driven losses is the ultimate mathematical secret to survival. If you get caught up in a bubble and you lose 50% of your money, what return do you need just to recover?
You need 100%. A 50% loss means you literally have to double your remaining money just to get back to the exact place you started from. And this brilliantly illustrates how the math curves so aggressively against you as the losses get deeper. If you take a 90% loss on a terrible stock pick or some highly leveraged real estate deal, you don't need 90% to recover. You need a staggering 900% return just to break even. The whole grows so much faster than the loss. And what if your portfolio hits zero? Well, you need an infinite return to recover, because anything multiplied by zero is still zero. This proves that survival is literally the entire strategy of investing. Sizing your bets, avoiding leverage you can't realistically cover, and refusing to concentrate your portfolio on things you don't fully control, that's how you prevent that fatal zero. You really don't have to be a genius to build wealth. You just have to avoid being wiped out. I want to leave you with this final thought to carry with you today. In a world completely full of noise, hype, and financial illusions, true wealth is built by those who anchor themselves in the cold, unglamorous, real math. So, take a hard look at your own portfolio right now and ask yourself, are you looking at evidence or are you just looking at a crowd? Think about it. We'll see you next time.